I've never been affronted by the idea of extraterrestrial intelligence. I've come to be affronted by anything which can be symbolized by initials. So I think CIA, MI5, ET, UFO is offensive. I mean, it produces a knee-jerk reaction. So I'm not interested in ETs or UFOs. I think we're talking about other civilizations who are not based on planet Earth. I think we are being taught perhaps one lesson, which is that there exist tangibly other prodigious consciousnesses and intelligences, and that now they seem to be interested tangibly, materially, in making contact with us.
It's July 1983. I'm travelling between government offices near Winchester in Hampshire, England. And I came out of some trees and I looked to the left. There was a beautiful amphitheatre there. And I sort of took a second look, I was like, what's that? And below the hill were 5 circles forming a cross. This was cold out of nowhere. It was me on my way to a meeting with this problem or that problem to think about, looking, seeing, and wondering, what in the world is this? I didn't know what to expect, and I could see no tracks in the field. So I went quietly, made my way towards the nearest of the 5 circles, and it was the pristine appearance of it that so impressed me. The whole impression I got from really obviously haven't seen anything like it before, was that it really hadn't been there that long, because the plants were moving, and I could hear and watch the occasional one just the head would pop up, separating themselves from where they'd been impacted. What I was looking at looked as if it was laid down in one head. It looked, in a way, so natural. The plants were beautifully bent over and swirled around. There were no marks. I looked for the obvious places. Now, if somebody made this, well, okay, maybe somebody made this. So I go to where people would have had to have stood, in the center. And I'm looking very carefully. I'm looking at these small nodules of dried soil. I'm looking underneath, and they were still dried and not crumbled. Under my own foot, I pick my foot up and I look, and it's powder. And yet, here in the center, it's not. I went and found the farmer, who was not particularly happy to see me. He was eventually forthcoming in so much as he was telling me they'd had them for years. This was not a random event. This was not just a 5 circles in this one field. So I go and I speak to this guy and I speak to this guy, and clearly this is widespread. Somebody told me of somebody else who'd been inquiring, and this was Pat Delgado, and he had been talking to a Dr. Terence Meaden, a meteorologist in Wiltshire, because Meaden was also investigating circles of the same kind, same patterns, in his county. And so the three of us came together. We very quickly became aware of a light aircraft pilot. This was Busty Taylor.
In 1986, I met Colin Andrews, and we were all together checking into the Cropcircles.
Sometimes we were in a circle an hour, 2 hours from the actual moment of discovery. We were there.
Following Mr. Hall from Corehampton Down Farm and Pat's to the site of a formation of 3 circles in a field of winter barley.
You're still feeling the excitement from the farmer. I mean, he's just gone home, made a phone call to us, come back out, he's still out of breath, and this is exactly as he found it.
So the single track in there now is yours last night?
There into the centre and back again was mine. I just walked out, because I wasn't thinking, I just thought, I don't know, bloody deer have been here, and I just walked out there, realised then I saw the other 2, and I thought, Christ, we've got something strange here. So I retreated hastily, and these ladies...
Now I'm listening. I'm looking at a farmer who's not knowing where to go with this. Very excited. It's like, have you seen it? I mean, how many more have you seen of these? Where have you seen them? Are they the same as mine? I mean, do they appear in this sort of crop? Are they close to water? Mine's near this pond. Are the others? This guy's, he's buzzing.
And we would go out there with farmers' permission, and we had a real field day, and we really learned a lot in those early days. And we really found out some interesting lays and patterns.
See the clockwise outer band here, outer ring. About a third of this is hidden underneath this flare here. Then you have a tightening clockwise swirling pattern at this point, counterclockwise here at this point, and clockwise centre. Absolutely incredible. Very, very pretty.
Wherever possible, photographs from above before anybody walked in it. That was a report. From the report, we would be able to say, farmer discovered it, he walked there, there's his track, is that right? Yes, it is. We can account for that. What we would then do is that we would get magnetic north on a compass, and we would take magnetic north as our first radius to the edge of the circle, and then break it up every 45 degrees. We would see whether we had an ovoid or a circle.
Cropcircles were regarded as a subject of legitimate scientific interest, and at least 99% of the people who were around the Cropcircles, looking at the Cropcircles, that's including journalists, scientists and people, regarded this as a genuine phenomenon. There was no suggestion at that time that this could possibly be a man-made hoax of elaborate proportions. And there were scientists, they were out there with all sorts of equipment. They had cameras, they had radar, they had other measuring devices, magnetometers, they had radiation detectors, goodness knows what.
I'll take the centre one of the 3.
Okay. Yeah.
You could just move your foot a minute. And as you can see, this is a complete straight one.
Yes.
That's the angle of the crop.
Right.
This is the type of bends that was in this. This is like a cabbage plant, but as you can see, it's a 90-degree bend. And if you can imagine, that was in the ground, and there's just enough room for the leaves and everything else to be on the ground.
Plant samples, I think the first one's in the year that I started. Pat Delgado sent the first plant samples to Dr. Levengood, the biophysicist here in Michigan.
Can you tell me a little bit about Levengood?
He had been at the University of Michigan as a research scientist. Then he went into industry and for a good many years worked in industry. Then, as soon as he could, I think, he built his own lab at home because he has lots of personal interests that he wanted to pursue. And he and Pat made these arrangements to get some samples sent to him. He wanted to see what he could see in the plants. And so we started testing crop circles all over the world. By now, I think at least 350, maybe it's 400, that we have sampled in 8 different countries, 8 or 9 now, including Australia, Israel, Canada, the United States, Germany, the Netherlands, England. We've done multiple circles in multiple different crops over 10 years. And what Levengood documented beautifully were the basic changes in the plants that, in his opinion, were not caused by fungus, were not caused by pesticides, were not caused by unusual fertilizer application, were not wind or weather damage, caused by something else.
Before 1990, we had circles, but circles in large quantities, or maybe multiple circles, maybe circles with rings around them, circles with a lot of grape shot, or little circles scattered around, this sort of thing.
They evolved from a simple circle, a straightforward simple circle. It was intriguing, to say the least, that it started initially circle with a single ring, then a double ring. Then we had the circle with its nearby neighbour, and that neighbour was half the size of the mother circle, as it were. Those appeared all over the south of England, and then there were 3. Now 2 neighbours, both half the size of the central circle, in a straight line. Now that was doubled, and at 90 degrees, so now we have 4 forming a Celtic cross. Unconnected satellites, but a traditional Celtic cross.
There were unmistakable signs of intelligent origin in the crop circles. You couldn't deny this. Say it was some kind of scientific phenomenon which was meteorological or caused by some ionospheric vortex, something of this kind, just did not square up with what I saw, which consistently showed signs of intelligence. The geometric shapes, the patterns, the things of this kind could not possibly have been made by some mindless phenomenon like a vortex or a dust devil or some kind of whirlwind. It was simply out of the question.
I suppose the bottom line is we are looking at bent plants, but bent plants uniformly forming a structure, a geometry. It's precise, it's intelligently located, there is nothing random about the placement. They are purposefully placed.
Some of them have this very complex energy print. Nowadays they're all just swirled. These ones are very, very, very interesting because they've got this sort of energy pattern. And I always liked studying those ones because they're almost impossible. In those days I was wondering whether they were made by people, and things like this are almost impossible to hoax. These aren't just arbitrarily placed as circles. There's a certain magical way in which they've been laid out. If you were to graphically present it as a grid, you more or less get that. a hexagonal grid or triangular grid, standard triangular grid, and here are your three edge alignments, one going up there, one going down there, one going down there. So there's a line just clipping three circles, and I call those tangents, which is what they're doing. It's one line, it's tangenting three circles. I was really struck immediately by the precision of the thing, and as far as I was concerned, it helped to explain the beauty of it, just as a graphic.
So the only way to do this really is to design it to be such.
Yeah.
The chances of it being accidental or some sort of natural occurring.
Well, you could say maybe natural, but certainly not some drunken farmers.
For me, the crop circle phenomenon started on August the 4th, 1985, when I found my first Celtic 5, which was about 4 miles from where we are now. I went to all the museums, the London Museum, Salisbury Museum, photographed everything I could find in regards to Celtic symbolism, and from 1985 to 1989, all the symbols I'd photographed up to then appeared in the crops.
I was flying with Busty, and he said to me over a place in Hampshire, you know, it wouldn't be quite something to see all of the patterns we've seen before all overlaid into one intricate design.
And the very next day, that formation was on the ground, more or less where I'd said the words. That one was the Celtic 5 with a ring around the outside of it.
The formation is absolutely huge. In front of the harvester now is the centre of a circle, and it is absolutely enormous. Very much larger than any of the circles connected with annular rings we've seen before. And here we come up to the first circle, which is formed on the annular ring. The heads of the plants on this side lie over the top of the plants flattened during the formation of the annular ring. This is definitely genuine. I think we've got a number one again, the first of its kind.
So it was the two combinations put together then. Of course, when you check the, the Celtic symbols, it's there.
This was the formation that appears on the cover of Colin Andrews' book, Circular Evidence. It was the first really famous crop circle it's the crop circle that got imprinted in most people's minds at the very early stage of the phenomenon, and it was simply a beautiful Celtic cross. It was very interesting that if you drew a pentagram on the outer circle, just hang it in there, it encloses a central space that is the size of the central element. And if you repeat that procedure, you take the central element and hang a pentagram inside it and fill that space with a circle. That circle there is the size of these 4 satellites. So you've got the same proportion expressed twice invisibly in this formation, which is one of the reasons I think why it is very pleasing. There's all this stuff going on, which is always the case in good design and good sacred art.
And the interesting thing was that it was sitting on top of an underground reservoir. And this is another thing that we have noticed with the true phenomenon, that it seems to locate where there's water, very close to water.
It's something like 93 to 98% of the formations do in fact occur over this chalk and or green sand aquifer.
Right.
As the summer comes on and there's less and less moisture, rain, the aquifer recedes. And as it does, it sinks down lower. As the edges of it recede, you get a strong electrical charge set up in the ground because the water percolating through the chalk creates this charge. As the summer goes along, you see the charge increases. The lower the aquifer is, the farther the water has to travel through the chalk, the greater the electrical charge.
Okay.
Well, guess what? The numbers of crop circles cluster along the edges of the aquifer also. And one of the questions that comes up all the time is, why don't they occur everywhere? Well, we don't know yet why they don't, but this is one possible answer.
originally all of this land here was covered in trees. And then about 7,000 years ago, the people came here and they cleared the land, and it was really the heart of England. It was the beginning of farming, and there was a huge community actually able to live here. All of this landscape was worshipped as a landscape, and it was also laid out in what we would call the Druidic or the Celtic wheel. The place of the north would be associated with winter and internalizing. The place in the east would be sunrise and new beginnings.
In recent years, archaeologists have discovered probably the most ancient site ever found in Britain.
On your farm?
On Golden Bald Hill, which is next to our farm. It's much older than anything that's ever been found before, probably by at least 2,000 years.
And what was the nature of it? What was?
Well, a habitation site, and people lived there, possibly dating back to 6,000 BC.
In this area, you'll see carved on the hillsides a lot of white horses. And the white horse is the symbol of Britain, Albion. And it's the carrier of the soul to the other world. A lot were done in the last century. And when they dug into the hillsides, in many cases they found the ancient, the old horses. There is remaining one big white horse at Uffington, which has now been proved to go back to at least 2,500 BC. They were meant to be seen by the gods. They're meant to be seen from above.
I think this has always been an ancient sacred site and an important place.
And of course this makes such sense in terms of the whole crop circle phenomenon. Why is it in England? People always say, well, why do they have all the best formations in England? What's that all about? And this is the story, that the English landscape is loaded with all kinds of...
We have phenomenal sacred landscape. I strongly believe that man came here, probably from all over the world even, thousands of years ago, and worshipped here, and built Avebury and Silbury.
Silbury Hill is right in front of us, known as the Hill of the Shining Beings. This is a very, very ancient and the largest man-made mound certainly in Europe. And yes, there have been nearly every season in the days you could climb Silbury, you could see in the height of the season at least half a dozen formations within actual sight of Silbury.
In 1990, a whole new event happened when we got the linear effect, because we got the shaft which joined the two circles together. They were something we'd just never seen before. The sheer wonder and magic and excitement was almost too much to bear.
In 1990, we had the very first pictogram. We thought they were all like that. It turned out we had the first boxes, the first keys. Prior to that, they'd always been circles.
It was that amazing Alton Barnes pictogram, which stretched out in the landscape 365 foot of it. And it was unheard of. We'd never had anything that length. But not only just one, there were 3 of them in the area, which had all occurred almost the same night. And the interesting thing was that they had additions to them, little sort of spokes coming off them, which scholars of the arcane likened to astronomical symbols, Celtic symbols, and it brought in people from all different disciplines, and suddenly everybody was talking together. You got the scientists starting to talk to the metaphysicists.
How many people do you think came through?
Thousands. Sort of carnival atmosphere. Total strangers stood together in groups, chatting away about, gosh, you know, what's caused it?
See, I love these. Look at that. That is a piece of history. Look at that. That's the first ever time that a crop circle created shapes, actual breaks in the crop.
Oh, really?
So that's a hand-drawn survey of that. This is someone that's just gone in and said, what is this? I don't know what it is, but I want to measure it. And, you know, within 2 days of it appearing, Mr. Someone or other has gone in, left his car at the road, gone down. His wife sat down and gone, wow. And he's gone, I've got to go back to the car and get a pen. I want to measure this. And then they go back and they measure it. It's what Colin and Pat were doing as well, starting to measure them. In those days, it was evolving very, very fast. It seemed to be accelerating at an extraordinary rate.
I had a helicopter and I got there when it was really quite fresh, and it was just totally amazing, that circle. But it didn't seem to be part of what we suddenly called the genuine phenomenon. This is an alchemical symbol, and they've interpreted the various symbols on the corners as being various philosophical or mystical symbols.
It's quite complex. You think it's got a basic threefold geometry, but it hasn't. And you also think those edges are straight. They're not. So let's have a look. Superimposed on it is a perfect triangle. If you hang a perfect triangle orientated north, that one there is due north from the middle. So if we go 120 degrees west from that line there, it would have been a bit further north if it had been on a true triangular geometry. Then you can see the difference between where it actually is placed and the ideal 120 degree triangular geometry creates a little circle. That little circle in itself is exactly the size of the circle that appears over here on this part that is precisely 120 degrees round that way. Every detail of these things, when you start looking at them, is so carefully thought through and precise that it really is mysterious. From the centre, there's an obvious outer radius defined to there and there. Encircle the whole figure, hang a pentagram in it, the arms cross to define the size of the central element, put another pentagram in it, the arms cross to define the size of the central element. And furthermore, if we point the pentagram due east, it will exactly pick up this arm. And pentagrams pointing due east is the standard way you orientate a pentagram in the landscape if you're building a sacred temple. And then at a stone circle down the road, an ancient stone circle, you find the same use of a pentagram pointing east. It was exactly the same use of geometry. And it was very interesting that the crop circles were giving me clues that were really feeding my research into stone circles.
So we wonder what came first. Did there appear in the land, in the original crops, these circles? And And did they mark these places with stone to hold the energy there?
The ancients had geometry as a scheme of operating, as a channel between themselves and the higher domain. Stone circles been there for 5,000 years. It's endured. They're made of 50, 60-ton stones, some of them. And they've been there for 5,000 years, and they're geometrical. And the crop circles are there for 2 or 3 weeks, and they're also geometrical. And so although you would think that they're not related in time, and they're not related in terms of their endurance, they are giving, if you like, a message. Maths is a universal language, and geometry is a way of speaking certain things. And we must therefore assume that one of the most powerful tools to understand the message is to assume there might be a message and learn how we must understand geometry in order to receive that message.
In order to fully grasp what's going on here, you have to study geometry. Geometry is the organization of space within which all objects happen.
So every object has a relationship to some geometric principle?
Yeah, every object is geometrical. It's got, all the natural world has geometry built right into its very structure.
The principle of sacred geometry is?
People who study sacred geometry believe that sacred geometry embodies the notion that all of nature is organized geometrically, whether it's the natural world or the unseen dimensions. The symbols that we see in sacred geometry used in churches or in paintings or in the occult world all have their derivation from some geometric organization of the subconscious or the unconscious mind.
Yes, I did call it sacred geometry because I call it well, symbolic geometry or geometry with meaning. I mean, it is sacred because it's eternal, which is what sacred means.
The circle is the fundamental symbol of humanity on Earth. It has the most widespread symbolic meaning culturally. If you're looking for a two-dimensional form which has unity, it's the circle. There's nothing else. Scholars and philosophers in different ages have perceived this as not the most appropriate, but the only possible symbol of God and divinity and heaven.
At times of great need, the gods sometimes, historically, will communicate to man. And the medium through which they do that is always traditionally Mercury. Mercury is the messenger of the gods. And the Hermetic arts and Hermetic traditions have specific fingerprints, one of them being the pentagram.
So the pentagram is the star, right? It's always used by wizards and witches. You may say, nowadays, how can we express that? And you can express it by saying that all the ratios of the pentagram are golden ratios. And the divine proportion is the most special, or golden ratio is the most special proportion of all, because as the part is to the whole, so the larger part is to the smaller part.
The small thing to this is the same as this to the whole thing.
The proportion of the small to the large is the same as the large to the whole.
That's right. And even here, it's the same. If you follow this process of increasing the five-fold stars,
right,
this and this is the same as this to this, or as this to the whole. The genuine crop circles look so harmonic. They include harmonies which can be found in ourselves. If we talk about the golden section, your whole body is the golden sections. The lengths of the bones to each other are always everywhere in the golden section. So, golden section is everywhere. And so it's also in you and it's also in your mind. And if you see something which is proportioned in the golden section, on the golden mean, you feel a familiarity with it. And of course you are, because it's all over in you. And you are a living example of the golden section.
Even though we would find geometries in nature, like in the petals of a flower, for example, these geometries that we were seeing as early as 90 and 91 were expressing theorems that were not in Euclid's geometry. So this implied not just intentional design, but very creative intentional design in terms of geometry.
Yeah.
And that then created the possibility of it being truly another. Some other intelligence, very intelligent, creating these circles with these geometries and doing something new.
As a school maths teacher, what pulls me into it is that nobody's ever seen these designs before or thought of them. They're not just brought out of old books, you know.
Right.
It's not just sacred geometry from old temples. It really isn't.
Crop circles will have ancient symbology, they will have advanced mathematics in the same symbol. When we really follow this closely, we can see that there is a train of thought coming through. And there are many strands of symbols, and it's very articulate, very eloquent. To start with, they were just purely circular. Then we got into the linear aspect. Then one year we had insectograms. The year of the insectograms. Then we had the year of the curly men. Oh, that was a lovely year. Then we had the year which was very organic, where we started getting the scorpions and the bees. That was a brilliant year. That brought in tremendous symbology. Then we started getting the fractals. That was exciting. We then got much more into the maths, the geometry. That was the beginning of the really serious geometry, the fractal images.
Where we've got the cock fractal here, you can actually calculate it mathematically. The cock fractal is basically a line, you divide the line by putting a point in it and basically stretch it out, so you basically get a triangle on a straight line. The thing with fractals is basically because it's recursive, you're dividing each line into two iterations. So if I redraw it, you can see each line is basically a miniature version of what was the previous one. And that's where you could see the crop circles come into it. And obviously if you went to 3 iterations, redraw it, each one of those in turn divides. So of course you can go on infinitely with a fractal.
In 1996, we had the Julius set appear very close to Stonehenge. Now, my friend Rod Taylor, who was a pilot, was flying with a friend from Exeter back to Thruxton, which is where we are now, and they circled around Stonehenge, and my friend Rod Taylor was taking photographs of the pilot. Well, they left Stonehenge, came here, Rod got out, the pilot got back in after being refueled and flew back down towards Exeter, and then noticed this formation next door to Stonehenge. Now, they sort of worked it out, the time lapse between when they were there to get here, refueled, back in the plane, back was about 25 minutes. And they swear blind that that formation was not there when they were circling around Stonehenge at the time. So we got a 25-minute gap where 140 circles appeared at Stonehenge, rather mysteriously, and really we haven't got to the bottom of that one yet.
This is indeed the queue to the, right the way up to this crop circle. It's absolutely extraordinary. Stonehenge is just there, and the crop circle is on the left-hand side. And here's the sign, come see Europe's best crop circle. The farmer has decided to open his field. Yesterday I spoke to him and he was wanting to keep people out and was very angry about its arrival. Now it would appear that he's thought things through and can see that he's able to compensate for the damage by charging £3 a head to enter, and now we have this problem.
Thanks a lot.
When can they do it without being seen?
So how many people do you reckon you've had here today?
I reckon about 200-300 probably.
Uh-huh.
Quite busy.
And I guess you're seeing people from all kinds of parts of the world?
Yeah, we've had Americans in, we've had Dutch family in, Australia.
What's your own opinion on what it is that we have here? Do you have a view?
I can't see anybody doing that, any human person doing that, for a variety of reasons. It's quite a public place where we are,
Yeah.
so being able to do it without being seen.
You don't know exactly.
I think it's nice. We have one or two mysteries left in life that people can't sort of come up with an answer for, and it's nice.
Sure. So they're doing pretty well, actually. They're on the back end of it. So what you got so far, Richard?
This one that you asked me to have a look at.
Right, oh right.
That one, in fact, when you line up the centre with that and that, they're exactly in line.
Thanks, Laura. With the compass bearing, you know, we've been talking about the central circle and the open end cutting either side of Stonehenge. Have you been able to look at that or confirm that? Do you have a compass yourself? Is that
Yes, I've confirmed that.
That might be...
I've got fairly accurate.
That would be a good thing to do, I think. My compass shows from the centre of this circle to the right-hand side of the stones is 0 degrees.
Right.
And the open end, which is here, to the left-hand side of the stones is 0 degrees.
The centre of the circle again?
Yes, centre.
Right.
So we're in the open end of the tell right now. As I bring it back, I can see it. There it is, settle on 0. There, we got it, 0.
To the musicians, it was a bass clef. To the geometers and mathematicians, it was a computer-generated fractal image, which they called the Julia set. That's why it got its name. To the marine biologist, it was a perfect example of a cross-section of a nautilus, a seashell. And to a physiotherapist who counted out the number of circles, she said, well, that is absolutely the correct number of vertebrae in a mammalian skeleton.
There are families of circles, like Julia sets, the Mandelbrots, or fractals. And it's very interesting that all of them come in groups of 3, with each major themes. You know, the Julia sets and the fractal stars and the Mandelbrots. We had 3 of them, and they all followed the following line by its complexity and size. In 96, we had the Julius head at Stonehenge. It was the single one. Then we had the triple Julius head and the small Julius head, or Julius head-like shape at Livingston Castle. They appeared in this 1, 2, 3 on a timeline. But the geometry or the complexity and the size was 1, 2, 3. The same happened with the fractal stars. We had first Silbury Hill, which was the simple one, then Milk Hill with the interior one, and then a triangle like this, a simple version of it. 1, 2, 3 in relation to time, but then 1, 2, 3 in relation to the complexity and size. It looks like a plan. The plan was not just followed in 1 year, it also went over 3 years, and even by crossing countries, by crossing borders.
We're being forced to consider that this universe has all kinds of intelligences all around us that we have been ignoring. Particular intelligences can act freely within the universe that we inhabit. And they don't have to be our intelligence. They can be mysterious other intelligences, you know? I think that's really what's so fascinating, is that the various domains of intelligence show that just like we are a particular intelligence within the cosmos, we can make art in participation with other forces, so these other intelligences can do the same thing.
Well, I think the one thing that people misunderstand about art is that the viewer is part of the art.
Right.
The art without the viewer doesn't even exist.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't exist unless it's viewed. That is what the art is about. It's in the moving through time and space, the evolution and the unfolding of the experience. When you look at a painting by Van Gogh, you see a picture of a landscape, maybe some people walking through it and stuff like that, and yet in that you can also sense his energy, who he is, who he was. You get a whole, there's this whole encapsulation of this person. So if I was to look at and analyze Cropcircles, I would try to look at him in terms of like, how do I go back to the creator from this, the same way I look at a painting.
If these were messages coming from somewhere else, it's entirely appropriate that the thing would be witty, playful, geometrical, and staggeringly beautiful and inspiring. The systems of proportion used in all sacred art and architecture are very specific. They all embody a certain amount of geometry, and they all obey certain rules. There are rules which state that you have to balance line and curve in sacred art. We see it all over the place in church windows, Islamic patterns, all the rest of it. So the line elements of a design have to balance the curve elements of a design. Crop circles were obeying that rule. Another rule, you have to balance your light and your dark in any piece of good ancient sacred art. Again, crop circles were obeying that rule. The two-ness of it, the laid crop and the standing crop. Sacred art is supposed to be operating without ego. You don't sign, you don't have artists behind sacred art. The divine is supposed to be operating through sacred art. Again, crop circles were exactly following that rule. Another rule, your integrity of materials in sacred art. You shouldn't really be using anything that's got anything that isn't directly from the earth. You want to stay green and clean and holy. Again, crop circles are obeying that rule. And then you've even got other rules, such as the temporary nature of quite a lot of sacred art, that it's often destroyed. After it's made, it's not supposed to be venerated too highly for too long, otherwise it becomes a sacred cow. And again, crop circles, they're being mowed down every year. Another good example of it. Crop circles are the finest example of modern innovative sacred art for our times. There's no competition. There's no competition. There's nothing happening in the visual arts or modern arts at any level, anywhere on the planet at the moment that begins to compare with it as an art phenomenon. And there is no artist, certainly, who could begin to compare with the artist who is behind the crop circle phenomenon in terms of design. They are very, 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 very good designers, and yet they don't hold their head up. So who are they? So what is it? So who's behind it? Why does it bear all the hallmarks of a mercurial intervention in some way, or even something else? I mean, if it's the guys in the spaceships, I'd love to visit one of their chapels, you know, because they sure do good windows.
Okay, you don't know, of course, where to walk. What we're going to do is we're going to follow the tram line, and then we take the proper tram line to go up into the formation. So we just go in there. To be honest, I thought all the crop circles were big hoax, one big fake. There is a phenomenon, but I don't know exactly what it is. People are fairly limited in their way of thinking. They want to have the answer, it's alien or it's human. And I think it's something in between. I don't think it's aliens. I don't think it's coming from outer space. But on the other hand, there is a phenomenon. It's not just one big hoax. Something extraordinary is going on here. And I think it has to do with our own being, our own way of thinking. Well, let's see, let's not miss it. So in fact, in a way, we are creating them ourselves, but not in the traditional way of putting the crop flat with a board, but I think we do it ourselves anyway. It's not coming from outer space, it's us. We are looking at ourselves. It's our own mirrors we are looking at. Okay, let's go in. From what I see from here now, it looks a little bit violent to me. You see, the crop is shooting up already again. It's a little getting up. There's one thing I learned in all the years I'm coming in the crop circles, is that it's very difficult to judge by eye just is it genuine or not. I tried to do that when I came for the first time. I thought, oh, this is genuine, this is not, just by looking at it, but that's very difficult. Every crop circle has its own character. So this is done in straight lines. If you can see, it's alternating. This one is on top, then you have this one, then it's this one again. You see the different layers. So if this is man-made, 2 people were needed to do this, at least.
Why is that?
Because it's not, It's not that one side went down and then the other side. You can see that this is over this again, but this is over that again. So what you need is two people who do it alternately. I'm not saying people did it, but that's how difficult this is already. Only this small part already is not that easy. It's not that straightforward as you would think if you look at it for the first time.